Hey guys, tonight we will drift through misted smoke and glimmering candlelight to immerse ourselves in a dark tale of authority, esplendor, and decay. You are about to hear the horrifying journey of a mysterious disease, slipping through the reigns of kings, queens, and noble houses for centuries, beginning with whispered secrets and blood-oozing sores, and ending with royal courts crumbling into silence. Brace yourselves. You will not survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Please comment below to let me know where you are watching from and what time it is on your clock right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Charles VII, 1494, 1461, King of France. Regarded as the first spark that transmitted the Italian disease into Europe through the Neapolitan campaign, the first person ever recorded to contract syphilis was Charles VII, King of France, reigning from 1494 to 1461, rather than emerging from a gilded palace. This pandemic truly ignited on the battlefield in the spring of 1494. Charles VII eagerly led his army into southern Italy, yearning to restore the glory of ancient Rome, unaware that he carried with him an invisible and far more deadly foe than any spear. The moment his soldiers set foot on the docks of Naples, rumors of a strange malady swept through the encampments. Before long, the troops writhed in agony over deep, festering sores, black pus oozing from their mouths, and flesh rotting as though it were waterlogged wood. Swollen blisters in their most sensitive regions left many unable to march. Some soldiers went blind within weeks, while others vanished mysteriously in the night, leaving only silent armor and cold weapons behind. It was not the Neapolitan pikes, but this disease itself, an undefeated tyrant that forced Charles to limp home in disgrace. When King Charles VII returned to Paris, the court could not conceal its anxiety. He appeared pale, his gaze vacant, his steps labored, and he often writhed in pain. Official chronicles delicately noted only fatigue from prolonged campaigns, but diplomatic correspondence between France and Naples revealed much more. The French ambassador urgently wired Paris. His Majesty's health is failing. The court dares not meet him. Instructions requested at once. While Naples replied tersely, "Our greatest threat is not an invading army, but this dreadful fever." This illness spread like a silent wildfire, slipping through secret liaisons and political marriages, from the lavish French chateau draped in velvet and heavy with perfume, to hidden encounters behind embroidered curtains in Naples. Renaissance painters, when depicting dukes and duchesses, often hid high collars or draped thick gloves to conceal syphilitic lesions. Many canvases show figures clutching scepters or prayer books in awkward poses, their faces and joints distorted by wounds no artist dared paint openly. Royal courts were thrown into turmoil and resorted to euphemisms to mask the tragedy: dropsical swellings for the bulging lymph nodes in the groin, nipple shock for genital lesions, and nervous exhaustion for the headaches, sleeplessness, and creeping madness. These roundabout terms all describe the same horrifying reality: a pandemic quietly tearing at the heart of power. Across Europe, noble houses scrambled to hide their shame, unwittingly turning arranged marriages into fresh channels of contagion. When a princess exchanged her wedding ring, she brought more than a dowry. She carried syphilis into the bridal chamber. Silk sheets, white on the eve of marriage, could be stained with blood and black. Pus the next morning, irrefutable evidence that even the proudest dynasties could not conceal this invisible spectre. The consequences went beyond physical collapse. Diplomatic crises ensued, alliances fractured, and national policies were overturned. One king abruptly broke an alliance. One queen was confined behind palace walls. Every upheaval bore the unseen hand of this disease. Yet few recognized syphilis As the secret counselor that undermined sovereignty for 4 centuries, Charles VII's legacy was not only his formidable fortresses, but also the stain of disease clinging to his throne. His story stands as a chilling warning in a world where silk and sovereignty go hand in hand. A single silent pandemic can unseat a kingdom. The second person recorded to have contracted syphilis was Henry VIII, 1491-1457, the renowned King of England, famous for 6 marriages, countless ulcers, and nervous disorders, who very likely suffered from syphilis. The Tudor monarch, celebrated for his absolute power, was unwittingly the victim of a courtly medical tragedy. From the moment he ascended the throne, Henry understood that his crown would remain secure only if a robust heir could inherit it. Accordingly, he entered into 6 marriages with European royal houses, each union arranged not merely for love but for political advantage. Yet these alliances ended in heartbreak stillbirths, frail infants, and a succession of unexplained obstetric calamities. Royal medical records reveal that Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, Jane Seymour, Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard, and finally, Catherine Parr, all endured recurrent fevers and mysterious sores that flared in predictable cycles. The palace stank of antiseptic and muffled groans. Henry himself suffered chronic fatigue, sudden joint pain, and extreme mood swings from elation to rage and paranoia, his temperament shifting unpredictably. Tudor secret archives preserved dispatches between London and European embassies, where diplomats discreetly referred to the burden of the king's procreation, a veiled reference to the mysterious malady ravaging both his body and royal bloodline. The English public, accustomed to viewing their monarch as divinely protected, began to wonder if the king's flesh could be shaken. Was the crown truly safeguarded by heaven beyond, debilitating his constitution? Syphilis sowed discord throughout the court. Catherine Howard, the once hopeful young queen, suffered a terrible pain in her lower belly only months after her marriage, sparking rumours of festering sores and successive miscarriages that threw the palace into disarray. Some even advised the king to seek alternative remedies. Yet this invisible foe proved too tenacious for contemporary treatments. Anne Boleyn, once his most beloved consort, died quietly of unknown causes, while Jane Seymour, the only wife to bear him a son, Edward succumbed to a high fever and agonizing bone pains on the eve of her deliverance. Hallmark signs of tertiary syphilis. Henry's international marriage policy thus became a double-edged sword. Unions with Spain, France, or the German states expanded his influence but also imported the disease into each court. Instead of strengthening his reign, he unwittingly transmitted the epidemic through each bridal chamber. Prompting subjects to question, can divine right endure when royal blood itself is eroded? Portraits of Henry at the height of his majesty depict him in opulent velvet robes, towering feathered hats, and a firm grip on his scepter. Yet Renaissance artists subtly concealed. His infirmity collars were drawn high to hide the throat and jaw, his scepter-bearing hand painted in soft focus to obscure cramped fingers, and his visage masked with thick white makeup and bright red lipstick to conceal a sallow, lifeless complexion. Each layer of paint was a phantom mask, obscuring a pain never named. Henry's medical legacy extends beyond official chronicles. He left the crown to his son, Edward, but also bequeathed the shadow of a dynasty paid for in silent suffering. Syphilis laid bare the limits of royal authority with neither cannon nor drum. This disease passed through a courtly embrace, had the power to upend dynastic plans and unleash tragedy throughout the realm. The third person recorded to have syphilis was Don Carlos of Spain, 1545-1568, a youthful Habsburg prince whose life ended behind iron bars and whose symptoms align closely with congenital syphilis. Born in 1545 to Philip II and Mary of Portugal, Don Carlos entered a world of opulence yet immediate fragility. Even as a child, He battled relentless headaches, staggered with unsteady steps, and bore mysterious sores that resisted healing. A severe fall down a staircase in his teens inflicted a traumatic brain injury that many historians believe merely exposed a deeper, congenital illness, likely syphilis contracted before birth. By his 16th year, the prince's condition deteriorated into chronic despair. He penned a disperate, coded pleas to his father. An inferno burns within my flesh and wash this blight from my body, suggesting he endured vicious mercury fumigations aimed at scorching the disease from his veins. Don Carlos's nights echoed with tormented cries. Unable to escape, unending pain, and a merciless itch spreading those sores ever wider. His public duties gave way to private horror. Court correspondence speaks of royal spirits under siege, urging Philip II to reconsider entrusting state affairs to a son overwhelmed by sickness and suicidal terrors. Rumours swirled of the prince shrieking about demons in the palace corridors and prostrating himself before unseen shadows, acts interpreted by clerics as either divine visions or spiritual collapse. Ultimately, the young prince became a liability to the realm. In 1560, Philip II ordered Don Carlos confined to a solitary stone chamber, cut off from all companionship. Within those cold walls and behind locked iron gates, the prince's health plunged further. Contemporary medical logs describe his skin as bruised and purplish, his nails blackened, and his cell heavy with the acrid odours of mercury and spirits. Don Carlos endured convulsions, bouts of temporary blindness, and sleepless nights filled only by his own anguished moans. Congenital syphilis ravaged not just his body but his mind, leaving him gaunt and mentally unmoored. When he died in 1568 at the age of 23, his body was discovered suspended between the palace and the dungeon, wounds fresh and nails dark beyond concealment. Official dispatches cited sudden exhaustion of unknown cause, yet courtiers whispered that congenital syphilis, never named openly, had claimed him. His death severed a branch of the Habsburg lineage and ignited a crisis of succession in Spain. Subjects and ministers alike began to doubt the divine inviolability of their monarchs. How could a prince, so carefully bred for power, to fall victim to an unseen scourge? In the aftermath, Don Carlos's tragic fate became a somber lesson. Lavish titles and glittering ceremonies could not shield royalty from microscopic invaders. His legacy, woven of sorrow, medical mystery, and dynastic upheaval, warns that even the mightiest throne can be undone by a silent disease, and that the bonds of blood offer no immunity to the quiet catastrophes lurking within. The fourth person recorded to have syphilis was Christian VII, 1749–1808, King of Denmark, whose severe mental deterioration and loss of control have long been attributed to prolonged infection, ascending the Danish throne at the tender age of 15 in 1764. Christian VII was celebrated as the youthful saviour of his realm, but soon revealed alarming signs of instability. Officially hailed as the heir who would guide Denmark into a golden age, he instead became tormented by sudden fits of hysteria, one moment laughing uproariously before his courtiers, the next sobbing uncontrollably. Midnight corridors echoed with his anguished cries as he occasionally overturned his own throne and abruptly altered ceremonial proceedings during state banquets. Court physicians' records describe his chronic complaints of sharp, needle-like pains in the skull, persistent numbness in hands and feet, and unrelenting exhaustion. On numerous occasions, minor Zeitzuras struck while he conducted audiences, leaving nobles in shock. Even more disturbing were his reported visions of ghostly figures drifting behind tapestries, accompanied by frantic calls for deceased friends, hallmarks consistent with neurosyphilis, in which the bacterium invades the central nervous system, spawning hallucinations and paranoia. As his condition worsened, Christian's physical health also declined. He endured days of self-imposed fasting followed by ravenous binges, his once robust frame becoming gaunt and pale. blemished by purplish lesions at the joints, classic signs of tertiary syphilis. Reluctantly, the royal medical staff noted his prolonged fevers and chronic insomnia. By day, he sat motionless in the palace gallery, his vacant stare fixed upon landscapes. By night, he abandoned royal protocol to wander drafty corridors. No matter how bitter the winter chill, in desperation, the court enlisted the German physician Johann Friedrich Struensee. Initially charged with treating the king through invigorating herbal baths and tonics, Struensee quickly supplanted official ministers, effectively governing in Christian's stead. He introduced steam treatments infused with northern herbs, acupuncture with steel needles, and topical applications of mercury to the king's open sores. These brutal regimens, meant to purge the hidden malady, only deepened Christian's terror. His paranoia escalated until he believed the very walls of Amalienborg whispered conspiracies against him. The growing unrest at court culminated in 1768, when Struensee was arrested and executed for usurping royal authority, ostensibly to restore Christian's faculties. Yet the king's health failed to improve. Isolated and incapacitated, Christian remained under confinement, with a regent appointed to administer state affairs. Once grand halls fell silent, the grand tapestries and chandeliers now shadows in a palace of fear. Some historians argue that the mercury treatments themselves compounded his decline, heavy metal accumulating in his brain and nervous system. Upon his death in 1808, official dispatches tersely noted decline of body and mind as the cause. Court rumour, however, pointed to lingering mercury fumes in his private chambers and to hastily completed portraits depicting him with sunken eyes and trembling hands clutching a prayer book. Subsequent scholarship, examining his symptoms and treatments, has concluded that untreated syphilis was the insidious force that robbed Christian VII of his reason and his crown. Christian VII's reign stands as a cautionary tale of early modern medicine's failures. A throne once underpinned by faith and lineage was laid bare by an invisible scourge. No sword could fell him. No army could subdue him. Yet a microscopic foe coursed through his veins and tore apart his mind. In a world where sovereignty and blood were inseparable, Christian VII revealed that even the mightiest monarchy can be undone from within. The fifth person recorded to have syphilis was Sigismund III Vasa 1566-1632, King of Poland-Lithuania, whose reign was marred by discharging sores and severe neuropsychiatric symptoms consistent with tertiary syphilis. Sigismund assumed the Polish crown in 1581, cementing the Vasa dynasty's ties to Sweden. Though celebrated for his political ambition and military campaigns, he secretly battled a relentless illness. Early on, painful red nodules formed at the base of his penis, discharging foul pus, and these lesions recurred despite repeated visits to the royal infirmary at Wow Castle. At first, the king resorted to customary folk remedies, swallowing deer antler salves, smearing himself with a black mineral and honey ointment, and submerging in aromatic herb baths. Such treatments offered only fleeting relief. The sores invariably reappeared. Courtiers were unnerved when eunuchs escorted basins of pungent medicaments through ceremonial parades to tend to the monarch's wounds. Within a decade, his condition progressed to the tertiary stage. Necrotic gummers erupted on his chest, hips, and arms visible under thin royal robes and carefully hidden by court painters in sumptuous portraits, yet undeniably present in unfinished sketches that reveal his drawn features and hollow temples. Evidence of repeated fevers. Concurrently, Sigismund descended into profound insomnia and mental instability. Monastic records from Krakow tell of nights filled with his anguished cries, as he railed against phantom conspirators and believed that ancestral portraits whispered treachery. On one occasion, he demanded the silver throne be burned to banish dark forces. A chilling display of paranoia noted by both theologians and royal physicians as emblematic of neurosyphilis. His erratic behavior plunged the Commonwealth into turmoil. Sessions of the Sejm were repeatedly disrupted when he could not remain seated. Feared candlelight was torturing his eyes, and abruptly expelled ministers he suspected of betrayal. To accommodate his tremors, decrees were signed while he sat on a rigid wooden chair, wearing a stabilizing crystal cap, with a bowl of heated mercury solution at his side. Mercury being the era's go-to anti-syphilitic cure. In a bid to quell his symptoms, Sigismund also tried oak tar vapor inhalations and concentrated brine baths, believed to purify the blood. Instead, these harsh regimens further sapped his strength. His skin cracked, limbs swelled, and spasms intensified so severely that attendants carried him on stretchers. Hearing him moan, "It feels as though my marrow is being hollowed out." By 1625, the king's physical and mental decline forced him to cede military command to his brothers and appoint a regent for foreign affairs. Though he still appeared at victory ceremonies, he needed a simple staff to stand and was described as gaunt, eyes glazed as if spiritless in official dispatches and group portraits of the war council. In his final years, physicians documented episodes of high fevers, delirium, and lengthy fainting spells. A plan to inject mercury into his knee joint was abandoned once its toxicity became clear, and court gossip held that the treatment threatened to kill him quicker than the disease. Sigismund died in 1632 at age 66, his death certificate citing fever and exhaustion. Yet whispers persisted that the Tsar's face was masked in bronze to conceal festering sores, and that courtiers still caught the lingering scent of mercury. His reign thus remains a testament to syphilis's hidden devastation, proof that even the crown's mightiest bearer can be undone, not by sword or siege, but by an invisible scourge within his own blood. The sixth person recorded to have syphilis was Ivan the Terrible 1530–1584, the first Russian ruler to claim the title Tsar. Infamous for his cruelty and paranoia, and long rumoured to have suffered from late-stage syphilis. Ascending as the inaugural Tsar of all Russia, Ivan IV forged a powerful yet chaotic empire from his seat in the Kremlin. His reign, though marked by ironclad authority and grand pomp, concealed a soul beset by inner turmoil. In the final decade of his life, amidst terrifying fits of rage and delusion, Ivan orchestrated the execution of his own son, subjected nobles to unspeakable torments, and ordered entire villages. Raised, yet the most insidious foe he confronted was not external foes, but a disease ravaging his own flesh. Surviving medical fragments reveal Ivan's agonizing physical decline, widespread ulcerations that caused his skin to peel away like decaying bark, relentless joint pain, and unexplained convulsions. At times he lapsed into blindness, secluding himself in pitch-dark chambers for days. Monastic chroniclers from Novgorod recount his midnight screams, professing sightings of demons and infernal spirits haunting his threshold, which clerics euphemized as spiritual trials or divine mandates. Behind closed doors, however, the Tsar's physicians prescribed draconian experiments, rubbing mercury ointment into his sores, inhaling steam distilled from remote herbs, and bathing in potent, salted spirits in a desperate bid to purge an abominable contagion. Such cruel regimens only deepened his physical debilitation and mental disintegration. Convinced even the Kremlin's ancient stones harbored betrayal, he commanded the destruction of every mirror and the burning of sacred texts, deeming them sources of temptation and evil. In the winter of 1571, fearing a conspiracy with his unseen malady, he ordered Novgorod's annihilation, an atrocity that claimed thousands of innocent lives. Each act of brutality was shadowed by Ivan's own agonies, blistering fevers, racking chills, and blood-soaked sores. Court life fell into disarray as courtiers feared to approach the ailing Tsar. The Empress vanished from public view, wary of the lingering stench of mercury and spirits on his garments. ceremonial splendor gave way to hushed audiences. His throne draped in simple cloth and illuminated by a solitary flickering lamp. Some whisper that Ivan even attempted a monastic self-imprisonment, hoping penitential isolation would contain his affliction. But syphilis recognizes no vows. It wormed its way through every vein, driving him ever deeper into paranoia. When Ivan finally succumbed in 1584, official annals tersely recorded his death as the result of a severe fever. Yet popular rumor insisted on a darker truth. At his funeral, his body lay masked in copper to conceal the ravaged flesh around his mouth and nose. Murmurs circulated that his hands had curled into rictus grips and his feet trembled as though carved by a blade. In the ensuing power vacuum, rival princes plunged Russia into civil strife. Thus, Ivan the Terrible's most haunting legacy is not merely the carnage he wrought upon others, but the tragedy of a ruler undone from within by a silent, microscopic adversary. In a realm where sword and scepter shared equal terror, Ivan's final undoing came not on the battlefield, but through the searing pain and creeping madness of his own diseased blood. The seventh person recorded to have syphilis was Joanna la Loca of Castile, 1479 to 1555, the Spanish queen whose descent into madness and constellation of symptoms align with neurosyphilis. Joanna, daughter of Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon, ascended to the Spanish throne in 1496 amid lofty dynastic hopes. From the outset, she exhibited an unnerving sensitivity to the burdens of sovereignty, unprovoked tears, haunted eyes, and sudden bouts of despair. Her politically arranged marriage to Philip the Handsome of Burgundy was meant to strengthen alliances, yet it soon exposed a deeper tragedy. Within a few years of her union, Joanna descended into severe psychological turmoil. Castle records describe countless sleepless nights spent wandering shadowed corridors, hiding beneath beds to flee unseen terrors. Vivid nightmares drove her to shriek strange, incoherent chants in the dead of night, signs now recognized as early neurosyphilis, the bacterium ravaging her central nervous system. Royal physicians noted her dizziness, headaches akin to thousands of pricks, and alarming memory lapses. She would forget familiar faces, even her own children, begging attendants, "Do not hide me in darkness," whenever they sought to move her. Behind closed doors, courtiers whispered of her disheveled hair, cloudy gaze, and uncontrollable tremors, symptoms no gown or crown could conceal. Officially, scholars spoke of heart-wrenching sorrow, the curse of forbidden love, or divine trials. But confidential dispatches between Madrid and Brussels told a bleaker tale. Her Majesty suffers torment from within. Secretly summoned Western doctors prescribed brutal mercury vapor baths in steamy vaults, followed by black ointments to purify the nerves. These experiments left Joanna emaciated, her skin parched, and her mind further fractured. By 30, Joanna's palace had become a maze of fear. Convinced every stone hid conspiracies, she ordered windows sealed and communication cut. Court festivities turned to silent mourning. Attendants dared not laugh or speak above a whisper. Sometimes, at the stroke of midnight, one could hear her calling Philip's name as fresh sores around her lips and extremities bled hallmarks of advanced neurosyphilis. Her final public breakdown occurred during a cathedral dedication, when she overturned the royal throne and menaced her ministers with a sword. Thereafter, Philip II stripped her of power and confined her at Medina del Campo under strict isolation. Thick stone walls and iron gates failed to stifle her anguished cries. In that dark exile, Joanna lost all sense of time, claiming to have endured 10 winters, though only 4 had passed. In her last years, Joanna lay listless on a crude wooden pallet, her once regal attire in tatters. Infirmary notes report her gaunt frame, bruised flesh, and blackened fingernails. heavy with the scent of mercury. She writhed through convulsions, endured temporary blindness, and spent interminable nights crying out in pain, grim proof of neurosyphilis's final stage. When Joanna died in 1555 at 76, the devastation of her body was laid bare. She was interred upright, clutching a holy Bible, her hollow expression a permanent testament to sorrow. Rumours spread that lesions around her mouth and gums never fully healed, and that half her hair had fallen away, leaving a stench of metallic mercury. Joanna La Loca leaves a sorrowful legacy far beyond the loss of royal authority. Her life and decline stands as a chilling demonstration of neurosyphilis's power to consume the mind and body. In an era where crown and cross were intertwined, syphilis emerged as the most insidious adversary unseen, unstoppable, and able to unravel dynasties from within. The eighth person recorded to have syphilis was Louis XV of France, 1710–1774, a famous monarch for his decadent velvet park, and plagued by an array of stubborn sores. Almost certainly the victim of syphilis, Louis XV, grandson to the Sun King, ascended to the throne at just 5 years old and ruled for a remarkable 64 years, his reign becoming emblematic of the Ancien Regime's moral decline. After a regency led by Philippe of Orléans, the young king inherited not only absolute power, but also a taste for hedonistic excess that soon eclipsed his royal responsibilities. By the mid-18th century, while France teetered on the brink of financial ruin, Louis was wholly absorbed in sumptuous orgies, secret lovers, and the silk-draped indulgence of his parc aux serfs. It was within this clandestine velvet park at the Petit Trianon that Louis handpicked beautiful young women to sate his passions. Whispers of their sudden disappearances into velvet-lined pavilions hidden amongst softly rustling grass fed public outrage and provided fertile ground for the silent spread of syphilis among the highest aristocracy. From 1752 onward, troubling signs emerged. Courtiers recorded the king's chronic complaints of 1,000 needles under the skin, as sores repeatedly blossomed along his torso and inner thighs. His once rosy complexion faded to a deathly pallor, and his hand trembled so violently that signing decrees became a Herculean task. Recurrent fevers, unrelenting insomnia, and crippling fatigue followed symptoms, unmistakably aligned with secondary and tertiary stages of the disease. Despite official claims of seasonal affliction or returning rheumatism, many physicians privately suspected the root cause lay in the king's debauches. Surviving notes from Dr. Georges Maréchal describe bitter herbal steam baths and black salves applied to the wounds, bringing fleeting relief before worse flare-ups. Other records speak of mercury soaks so potent they left the monarch drooling and his teeth loose. His body racked by mild convulsions, hallmarks of heavy metal poisoning. These physical ailments were mirrored by psychological torment. Louis would wander Versailles at night, convinced that the portraits on the walls and statues in the gardens whispered conspiracies against him. On one infamous occasion, he abruptly extinguished every candle in the hall and chased imagined phantoms, his screams echoing through the darkness and terrifying all who witnessed his breakdown. As the king's condition worsened, governance deteriorated. Council meetings grew shorter, as Louis could not endure lengthy budget debates. He would hastily sign off on funds before retreating to his velvet sanctuary, leaving ministers to manage the escalating crisis. Word of his illness spread to foreign courts, sowing doubt about France's stability when its supreme ruler was shrouded by the shadow of sickness. The Queen, Maria Leszczyńska, also fell ill. She spent a week in the infirmary with high fevers and severe aches. Initially diagnosed as food poisoning, only for strange blisters to appear on her hips. Ladies in waiting whispered that the royal chambers reeked of disinfectant, a futile attempt to mask the court's shame. Henceforth, the Queen avoided public appearances, fearing both for her reputation and further contagion. Despite all denials, Louis XV's aura of invincibility was irrevocably shattered. Once worshipped as a demigod, he became viewed as a tragic victim, resplendent on the outside. Decaying within, his luxurious robes and glittering crown could not conceal the haunted look in his eyes or the tremor in his grasp. His final portraits depict him in a broad-brimmed hat, gaunt and sleep-deprived, deep lines carved into his face, each detail bearing witness to his agony. Louis XV died in 1774 at the age of 64. The official cause of death was listed as cardiac failure and chronic exhaustion. Yet physicians whispered that syphilis was the silent assassin. His body lay in a gilded coffin. But courtiers spoke of the faint odour of mercury lingering in the death chamber. The Bourbon dynasty, already weakened, slipped further toward the upheaval that would culminate in revolution. In the annals of royal medicine, Louis XV stands as a stark example of syphilis's destructive power. In a world built on regal authority and public splendour, this invisible scourge hollowed out the monarchy from within, fueling scandal and hastening the fall of one of Europe's greatest dynasties. The ninth person to contract syphilis was Pedro I of Brazil and the fourth of Portugal, 1798-1834. The binational emperor of romantic fervour, who endured chronic joint pain, lifelong nasal discharge, and most likely suffered from neurosyphilis. Pedro I of Brazil and fourth of Portugal, 1798-1834. The 10th royal figure associated with syphilis, embodied both imperial grandeur and private torment. Born in Rio de Janeiro in 1798 as the son of King John VI of Portugal, he would later proclaim Brazil's independence in 1817 and briefly reign as Pedro IV of Portugal before abdicating in favour of his sister. Maria II, outwardly charismatic and ardently devoted to liberty. Pedro inwardly battled relentless joint pain that forced him to lean on a cane, chronic nasal discharge that left him perpetually breathing through his mouth, and crushing headaches that robbed him of sleep. His marriage to Empress Maria Leopoldina of Austria, admired for her intellect and compassion, ended in heartbreak when she died prematurely, plunging him into sleepless nights of moaning in solitude and pacing the palaces. Racked by pain, imperial physicians recorded his complaints of blood burning like fire within my joints, while court whispers described him clutching garlic cloves to staunch the never-ending nasal flow and startling companions with violent sneezes echoing through grand halls. Despite treatments ranging from herbal steam inhalations and acupuncture to strong spirit baths, nothing quelled his suffering. On occasion, Pedro would lapse into brief panic, crying out for Maria as if she still lived. His correspondence with Lisbon envoys quietly lamented a shaky mind, incapable of concentrating on state matters, and ministers speculated about installing a regent to preserve stability. By the early 1820s, portraits showed an emperor gaunt and pale, his eyes sunken, his hand trembling as he signed Brazil's constitution. He could not stand long at public ceremonies, collapsing onto the throne amid gasps from the assembly. Even his coronation festivities found him seated, feebly clutching a handkerchief to his nose. When Pedro died in 1834, at the age of 36, official accounts cited excessive fatigue and heart complications, but court gossip attributed his demise to neurosyphilis, the invisible scourge that had sapped both his body and his spirit. His coffin lay draped with Brazil's starry banner. Yet aides still spoke of the lingering odour of mercury from his final treatments. In the annals of both nations, his dual reign stands as a poignant reminder that even the most celebrated emperor may be undone by a microscopic adversary in his own blood. The 10th person recorded to have syphilis was George III, 1738-1820, King of England, whose descent into madness was long attributed to porphyria, but whose symptoms align closely with neurosyphilis. George III, whose reign spanned almost half a century, began his decline with subtle lapses of memory, calling the Prince of Wales someone else during afternoon tea, confusing familiar faces, By the spring of 1848, his condition worsened into full-blown paranoia. He believed his ministers plotted his assassination, ordered the sealing of Windsor Castle against this invisible adversary, and at night raged at unseen conspirators lurking in the corridors. Court physicians William Batty and Francis Willis later documented the king's excruciating headaches, facial twitching, and episodes of temporary blindness. He complained of thousand-pin pricks across his scalp, electric jolts down his spine, and numbness in his limbs. His behavior oscillated wildly, one moment embracing grandchildren, the next barricading himself alone. Convinced the castle walls whispered treason, contemporary dispatches from London to Edinburgh and Dublin recorded his descent in sober terms. His Majesty drifts between delirium and despair, mourning a glory long vanished. Official records speak only of chronic fevers and leaden melancholy, but modern historians recognize these as hallmark signs of late-stage syphilis rather than porphyria. Desperate for a cure, the court resorted to mercury and antimony purges, toad venom tinctures, and over-blended colonial herbs treatments as brutal as the illness itself. Laudanum was administered to dull the pain, leaving the king lethargic by day and unresponsive by candlelight. Under heavy layers of face powder designed to mask mouth and throat ulcerations, he attended rare audiences, struggling to swallow and often expelling dark, foul matter. As George's faculties failed, Parliament appointed the Prince Regent to govern. England found itself ruled in duality, a delusional monarch wandering empty halls, and a regent enforcing law with an iron hand. Political factions exploited his illness, some invoking the divine right of kings, others questioning a throne held by a diseased flesh. The porphyria diagnosis held sway for centuries, but a re-evaluation of court journals, physicians' notes, and personal letters casts neurosyphilis as the true culprit. His hallucinations, rage, and neurological collapse fit the disease's profile. When George III died in 1820, officially of natural infirmities of age, the nation mourned a sovereign undone by an unseen enemy. His final years stand as a grim reminder that even the loftiest crown can be shattered not by sword or bullet, but by a microscopic scourge. After surveying 10 male sovereigns marked by the merciless stamp of syphilis, we cannot overlook the fairer sex who shared this courtly medical destiny. From empresses, wielding regency, to potent queens, syphilis crept into every wrinkle and every stately portrait, sowing silent anguish within the royal household. Now, join me as we enter the realm of 4 illustrious women: Catherine de' Medici, Mary Bloody Mary, Mary, Queen of Scots, and Catherine Howard, to discover how this ruthless disease claimed their beauty, their sanity, and even their thrones. The 11th person recorded to contract syphilis was Catherine de' Medici, 1413-1620, Queen of France, from 1547 to 1540. 59. The wife of Henry II and mother of 3 future French monarchs. Catherine de' Medici, daughter of a powerful Florentine house, was married into the French court in 1547 to cement the Valois-Medici alliance. When Henry II died suddenly, she assumed the regency for her sons Francis II, Charles IX, and Henry III from 1559 until 1620. Behind her political brilliance, the Queen quietly endured the ravages of syphilis, festering sores in her nether regions that healed slowly, recurring fevers, and unrelenting exhaustion. It was rumoured that Catherine submitted to brutal treatments, applications of concentrated mercury ointments on her lesions to burn out the poison, and immersive baths infused with toxic herbs and wine. These harsh remedies caused her skin to blister and burn, leaving faint scars beneath her sumptuous gowns. Far from eradicating the disease, These poison baths only triggered further panic attacks and persistent hallucinations. While governing the realm, Catherine frequently succumbed to paranoia. She suffered chronic insomnia, screamed her late husband's name through the night, and by day raged at courtiers she believed were plotting to exploit her pain. Secret correspondence among her ministers recounts episodes in which she abruptly flung herself from the council table, slammed doors, and retreated to her private chambers to escape light and sound sensory triggers that intensified her physical agony. The combination of late-stage syphilis and mercury treatments further eroded her nerves. One courtier noted in his journal, "We have not merely lost a noble regent, but are witnessing the gradual collapse of her reason." Parisian gossip spoke of her fevered dreams of usurped thrones and enemies, lurking everywhere hallmarks of neurosyphilis, as the bacterium invaded her central nervous system. Political affairs became increasingly chaotic. The Queen's Council, once deftly managed by Catherine, was frequently postponed when she was forced to leave meetings mid-session to stave off debilitating pain. Even pre-drafted diplomatic edicts awaited her brief moments of strength for final signatures. On one occasion, she hurriedly scrawled her name upon a velvet-draped writing desk beside her bath, her hand visibly trembling, a telltale sign of her suffering. When Catherine died in 1620, at nearly 100 years of age, medical historians still speak of the nameless stain adorning the final page of her life. Court legend preserves the iron-tipped brush used to spread mercury ointment and a ledger of the savage treatments that failed to erase syphilis. Though remembered as mother to 3 kings and matriarch of the Bourbon-Valois line, Catherine's ultimate legacy remains the silent tragedy of a queen who paid dearly body and mind for power. The 12th person recorded to contract syphilis was Mary I, Bloody Mary of England, 1511-1588. Queen of England from 1553 to 1558. Famed for her brutal religious persecutions, yet secretly beset by serious health issues. Upon her accession, Mary demonstrated unyielding resolve to restore Catholicism, ruthlessly suppressing Protestants. But few realized that beneath her formidable exterior lay a sovereign ravaged by illness. Beginning in 1554, she reported menstrual irregularities of alarming severity, episodes lasting many weeks, interspersed with complete absences. Royal medical records note that Mary suffered relentless fatigue, accompanied by low-grade fevers and sharp lower abdominal pains that felt as though cut by a dagger. Yet, what truly alarmed her physicians was the onset of vascular sclerosis. Mary's hands grew ice-cold. Her fingers cripplingly contracted whenever she clasped her Book of Common Prayer. The skin over her elbows and knees stiffened, severely limiting her range of motion. Private correspondence even recounts occasions when she required assistance from her sister-in-law and advisor, Philippa, to traverse the corridors, her face ashen and her eyes ringed with dark circles. Moreover, there are accounts of a severe ulceration in her genital region that refused to heal for many months. Although court physicians hastily labelled it a female infection or external abscess, the medical notes plainly describe black discharge oozing forth, the surrounding skin thickened and intensely painful, beads of sweat coursing down her brow whenever she forced herself to stand. In a desperate attempt to staunch the flow and alleviate pain, Mary experimented with applications of mercury ointment mixed with bitter herbal poultices, only to see the surrounding flesh swell and keratinize, leaving mottled scales impossible to conceal beneath her royal robes. These agonies fueled bouts of unpredictable wrath. Mary would abruptly interrupt her subjects during audience, denouncing her Lord Chancellor as wicked for allowing her suffering, then strike the altar-bearing prayer books to vent her fury. Court chronicles describe a moment when she collapsed mid-session of the Privy Council and had to be borne out on a velvet-cushioned sedan chair. Gradually, her declining health began to affect state decisions. When she pronounced sentences of death upon Protestant heretics, Mary occasionally delayed for hours, waiting for a spasm to subside. forcing military commanders and judges to witness her trembling eyes squeezed shut before she could nod her assent. Such instability bred whispers among courtiers had this silent malady infiltrated the very heart of government, sowing profound unease. In 1558, Mary's strength broke under a protracted high fever. Royal surgeons performed multiple debridements of her ulcer, with little benefit and only further weakening her. At her final breath, she bequeathed the throne to her cousin Elizabeth, while throughout the palace corridors there drifted murmurs of the ghost of syphilis that had destroyed England's last Catholic dynasty. Mary I's medical legacy extends beyond her notorious burnings at the stake to a poignant tale of a powerful queen forced to confront an invisible enemy that ravaged her body, shattered her spirit, and ultimately her crown. In English history, Bloody Mary left a dual imprint. Her authority could not conceal her physical torment, nor could her personal tragedy be erased from each death warrant she signed. The 13th figure known to suffer from syphilis was Mary, Queen of Scots, 1516–1601, Monarch of Scotland, and subsequently Duchess of Albany from 1542 until 1567. After claiming the Scottish crown as a mere infant, Mary's rule unravelled in 1567 amid rebellion and personal scandal, driving her into English exile under nearly 19 years of rigid confinement. It was during this long imprisonment that secret dispatches and household journals began to record her steady physical decline and disturbing mental disturbances, symptoms that closely mirror tertiary syphilis affecting the nervous system. By 1570, Mary was routinely supported by attendants to traverse her chambers, lamenting that her joints felt as if crushed to powder. Not long after, she suffered transient blindness, periods of pitch-black vision followed by excruciating headaches that lasted for days. Receipts for restorative salves and scented soaks point to her desperate attempts to soothe burning limbs and pounding temples. Even more unsettling were her midnight terrors. Servants later testified to her pacing castle corridors, whispering of conspiratorial shadows or eyes lurking behind the hangings. On one occasion, convinced her keepers intended to poison her, she barricaded herself within her quarters, subsisting only on stale bread and water. Such bouts of paranoia and auditory hallucinations are hallmark signs of neurosyphilis invading the brain. Although her imprisonment was meant to neutralize her political threat to Elizabeth I, Mary's deteriorating health became painfully obvious. Illicit letters smuggled to her supporters describe days when she could scarcely raise a quill, and nights marred by violent convulsions that shook her frail frame. By the late 1580s, her attending physicians conceded that no common ailment could account for the ebony-coloured ulcers on her thighs, wounds resistant to every poultice and purge they applied. As her 45th birthday neared, Mary's captors grew wary of her unpredictable outbursts, from impassioned hymns in the darkness to shrieks of agony, treating her with a wary distance. Even her final audiences with Elizabeth I, just before her execution, in 1587, portray a weakened woman swathed in heavy velvet, her hollow cheeks framed by trembling fingers and haunted eyes. When Mary faced the block in 1587, the official charge remained treason. Yet whispers within court circles held that a far more insidious, invisible scourge had undermined her body and mind. From cradle to coffin, Mary, Queen of Scots, stands as a sombre testament to how even the loftiest crown cannot shield its bearer from the destructive power of a silent epidemic. The 14th person recorded to contract syphilis was Catherine Howard, 1521–1542, Queen of England, as Henry VIII's fifth wife, whose brief tenure at court was shadowed by references in apothecaries' notes to burning ulcers and dizzy spells. Early clues, pointing to syphilitic infection. Catherine Howard, a young Tudor consort famed for her vivacity, arrived at court amid opulent pageantry in the spring of 1536. Yet scarcely 6 months into her queenship, private medical journals began to catalogue her mounting complaints. The king's chief apothecary recorded that the queen suffered from a wound most sore in her nether, regions fiery to the touch and slow to heal, and episodes of vertigo so severe she reeled like a ship in stormy seas. Rather than simple courtly illness, these symptoms bore all the hallmarks of early syphilis. Court physicians discreetly noted unrelenting fatigue and low-grade fevers, alongside the painful lesions that resisted every ointment. At Windsor, a confidential memo described Catherine finding refuge in her chambers for days at a time. Unable to endure the court's glittering demands, Her Majesty's strength fails. She grows pale and trembles upon the stair. Rumours swirled that her medical treatment itself verged on the extreme. Some accounts hint that mercury-based plasters were applied directly to the raw sores, believed then to purge the taint. These caustic salves, while intended to expel the poison, only inflamed the Queen's skin further, leaving maps of scar tissue concealed beneath her brocaded gowns. Mentally, Catherine's condition appeared as alarming as her physical wounds. Observers wrote of sudden bouts of confusion during audiences. She would pause mid-sentence, eyes glazed as if called away by unseen horrors. Her ladies-in-waiting spoke in hushed tones of nights, spent walking the gallery, murmuring prayers for deliverance from a wicked fever that gnaws within. By the autumn of 1537, Catherine's frailty could no longer be ignored. Though her downfall ultimately resulted from charges of indiscretion, it is clear that this invisible malady had already sapped her vitality. When she was removed from court and confined to Sion Abbey, her medical records trail off amid notes of debilitating pain and persistent dizziness, grim testimony to a queen felled not only by scandal, but by a silent epidemic that none in Tudor England fully understood. The journey through the lives of these kings and queens under the lens of syphilis delivers not only a tragic saga, but also profound lessons on humanity and collective responsibility. This video has skillfully woven together historical records, diplomatic correspondence, and court medical notes to recreate a multidimensional narrative of how disease penetrated and devastated both body and mind at the seat of power. From the arrogance of Ivan the Terrible to Joanna the Mad's heartbreak, each biography underscores that in the shadows of authority, medicine and politics were inextricably intertwined. The greatest value this video provides is a wake-up call about the vulnerability of sovereignty, while prompting viewers to reflect on how our society still confronts infectious diseases today. Its message is that royal medical history is not merely an archaic tale, but a mirror to the present, urging us to establish just and scientific public health policies and to show compassion toward those who suffer. We learn the importance of advancing medical science, building effective epidemic prevention systems, and above all, treasuring every breath of our own and our communities' lives. Finally, the video closes not just with a roll call of illustrious names felled by bacteria, but with a vision of hope, a future where knowledge and medical ethics will conquer every pandemic, ensuring that power serves the health and happiness of all humankind.